What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Intel Within Podcast, episode 3. Tonight, recording with Aaron, a Air Force Special Operations team sergeant and host of the Instagram page. Aaron loves America because he sure does, and so do we, and that's why we're on this podcast.
Yep.
So what's up, Aaron?
Thanks,
How are
fellas. Hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on. Love what you guys are doing. Can't wait to sit down and talk with you. Hope you guys are well.
Definitely.
Yes.
Both very thankful that you decided to come on here with us for sure. I know this conversation is probably going to get pretty interesting.
Bunch of rabbit holes.
bunch of rabbit holes, which I'm okay with.
Yep.
And I definitely love your style on all the stuff that you put up on Instagram for sure. I know that you do a lot of stuff online. Big fan of all that you have to say. But yeah.
So yeah, he introduced me to your page as well. And it's just like immediate, same interest and everything. And then kind of told me a little bit about you. But for the people out there that don't know about you and kind of coming to the podcast, if you don't mind starting off, just kind of letting us know, a little bit about you, what you do, what the plans are, like where you're at now, and then just kind of go from there.
Yeah, no problem. So I want to start off with a classic disclaimer, right? So I'm on my own time here on my off time speaking as a civilian. My views don't represent anybody that I may work for, to include the DoD or any other entity. I'm speaking as my own personal citizen under First Amendment rights. That's very important for everybody to understand. So that's just me. I'm just a kid that grew up in Northeast Ohio, and September 11th happened. Like, my life before that was largely unremarkable, man. Like, I had a white picket fence. My parents are still married to this day. I'm the oldest of 6 kids that grew up in Northeast Ohio in a blue collar town. My dad was a fireman and a paramedic. I grew up in the firehouse, and then September 11th happened, and I had a failed college career that, I was bouncing around Northeast Ohio. I was a bar back, and I was bouncing and doing some bartending on the side and just generally getting in trouble and drinking too much, because that's what you do in Northeast Ohio. That's pretty much it. Northeast Ohio, nothing is given, everything is earned. That's what you do. You just you get your lunch pail and you go to work. Well, September 11th happened, and my whole world changed. I remember as a 21-year-old dude, watching, it was a Tuesday, watching September 11th happen. And both my grandfathers were in the Navy. Fun story about those two. They actually met each other. So one of the guys worked on a battleship, and the other guy worked on a ship that, no kidding, drove around to the other battle. It was like a support ship, and they drove around and they basically fixed the boilers. He was a boilerman on a ship, on a Navy ship. And no kidding, somewhere in the Pacific during their time, one grandfather Kilroy fixed grandfather Love's boat. And they didn't know this until their kids got married. So that's how small the Northeast
That's wild.
It is. Yeah. It was a crazy thing to figure out too. It's one of our favorite family stories to tell. But so, I heard their voices and my dad's voice ring in my head. And basically what they always told us when we grew up is that every generation owes this nation a debt. This nation has given everything to us, and each generation, you don't know what it's going to be, whether it's civil service or whether it's being active in your community. You owe this nation a debt. And on that day, on September 11th, 2001, I heard those voices sort of ringing in my head. I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do. So I went down to a recruiter. Classic story. I was telling my dad, I was like, hey, I think I need to go get in the military, and I want to go fight. So I'm gonna be a Marine. And he was like, can you do me a favor and just never do that? And I laughed, and I was like,
Please.
Why? Would I not make it or whatever? He's like, listen, man, go to the Air Force, please. Can you go to the Air Force first and just go talk to him? There's a job called pararescue. I think you might dig it. So that's all she wrote. I walked in the Air Force recruiter. I said, hey, I'm a swimmer. I'm in pretty good shape. Give me a week or two and I could train to do this pass test thing that I'm supposed to take. I think I could probably pass your PT test. And he just laughed at me. He was like, no, you probably won't. I was like, yeah, I probably will. I'm a pretty athletic kid. And then I came back a week later and I passed the pass test. I had a contract and off I went. I went to San Antonio, Texas about 2 months later. So I was January of 2002. I was in basic training in the Air Force. Very long, dramatic story short. I tried to be a PJ, failed miserably, dramatically. I actually quit. So I went through 2 full teams. So on the second team, like real close to the end, man, I was over it, and I was emotionally mature, and I was like, I don't want to do this. This is stupid. So then the Air Force gave me the opportunity to do another job for 5 years, which was tied to them. It was really cool. It was in Washington, D.C. And then like for the fourth year that I was there, so 2003, well, I guess 3 years, 2003 to 2005, I was at DC doing a different job. I was a phys tech. I worked the altitude chamber, and I put my package in to go back to pararescue. Spoiler alert, made it this time. And
no way.
I'm a winner.
Yeah, I
No
know.
way.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, that's the big reveal. We shouldn't have done it this early in the podcast, but I'm not very good at this thing. So,
That's neither.
yeah. So, so that was the deal, man. So I went back. I went back into the pipeline 2006, graduated 2008, and then I've been doing that ever since. So now we're 15 years later. I'm over 20 years, over 21 years, I guess, this January. And now I'm looking on moving to the other thing. So retirement is just around the corner. The deployment numbers don't matter. My number of missions don't matter. Like the war stories don't matter. And that stuff is never as cool as it really sounds. I'm happy to talk about it, but it's just not a thing that I ever focus on. But I love giving back to the community. I love this nation. I love it more than anything else. And it really bred the thing that I wanted to start, right? And I started, Aaron Loves America, which is obviously a play. My last name is Love. I put my name out there. I'm not a hard person to find, but I love America, and I think this nation is the best that the world has ever seen. It's produced the most free,
Absolutely.
most tolerant, most benevolent society in the history
Everybody
of
comes
mankind.
here, man.
Yeah.
Everybody.
And that's all the proof you need. I mean, everybody comes here, like you said. When people sit here and say, that capitalism has failed, America has failed, it's like, tell me how it's failed while you text me from your iPhone. Tell me how it's failed when you get in your car and you drive to work, or you get to telework now. Like, tell me how it's failed with all the money you can make in this country.
Everybody comes here, and it's like when I was growing up, it was in high school. I had a friend. His name is Brian. I won't throw his last name out there just in case he just happens to come across this. But he was Korean. His family moved to America, and at that time, of course, freshman year in high school, I'm a little naive, and I was like, "Hey, man, like, what brought your family here?" And he was just like, "Oh, dude," he was like, "It's the opportunity, the freedom." I was like, "That's awesome," and that's all I ever hear of all the other, everybody else around the world that comes, and even people in the military. They just want the freedom. They want they want the education.
I gotta say, for me, it's kind of wild growing up as a military brat, and when you brought up thinking about 9/11, I remember my dad was stationed at Yokota. I was in 8th grade when that happened. And I mean, everybody remembers where they were, but when I got done, with high school and moved back to the States and was on my own in college and getting to talk to kids that weren't military brats, the same kids that I grew up with my whole life, and just kind of talking about why I loved the United States, why I loved being able to travel, the opportunities the Air Force gave my family. People thought I was a weirdo. People thought I was stuck up because I had been to Japan, Germany, all over the globe, and to talk about, honestly, the love that my dad instilled in me in this country, and talking about that, and these people that had never left the bubble they live in, right, their whole life. It's like, you've not seen how lucky we really are here in the United States, and I've never been to, like, when I was a kid, never been to some places you'd call like, a shithole,
like a
you know what I mean?
Yeah, or something like that.
Not till I was in the Air Force, but it's just, we have such a different lifestyle here. And I'm not trying to say, we're, better than other people, but like, there's surely some amazing things about this country that, we take for granted.
Yeah. So what are some of your best memories, you'd say, from the start of your career up until now in the military?
That's a great question, man. And I'll tell you, it's a great question because I can't possibly narrow it down to my best memories. Some of my best memories came out of some of my worst times. I distinctly remember, a couple of times where, like, you're next to a guy that we almost just died, and I'm looking at a guy and we're laughing like idiots because that's all you can do, because it's just such a terrible, desperate scenario that you're just like, wow, we really almost just died. Boy, well, that's hilarious. Remember, like, there's a story that, my friend looked at me and I had made a radio call and he looked at me and he was like, man, that radio call really made you sound like a pussy. You sounded like you were really excited. I was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, hey man, like, is this the right time to make fun of me right now? Like, do we want to like maybe get back to base? There's always the great times of, I got to jump in the 65th anniversary of Normandy into Iron Mike DZ. Like, what you want to? I've never felt more proud to be an American than I was. There's a whole parade, right? There's the jump into so it's in Saint Mary, France, and Iron Mike DZ into Normandy. So we were there for a whole week. I never felt more American. That town was literally under, Nazi German control. And in Normandy, we jumped in and we liberated that town. I saw more American flags there and I felt more love for America from those people that lived there. I met people that were 80, 90 years old that were there when America took Normandy back from Germany. And I jumped in and, there's a whole parade that happened. And, some of those memories are the best that I can imagine. But honestly, it's the guys to my left and my right. And it's continual. I've got 21 years of looking to my left and my right and seeing other great American citizens that they do not give a shit about politics. They don't care about what's going on right now. They care about the mission. They care about the men.
It's funny. I did not know that you were in that jump because I was there when that happened. My family was there watching. And
oh man,
yeah,
we stayed on Utah Beach. We stayed right over the break wall on Utah Beach.
Yep. Yeah. No, that was awesome. I remember getting goosebumps. My dad's got pictures he loves showing everybody. So, but I got to go back to Normandy when I was in Germany, stationed there, and I agree. There's probably the nicest people I've ever met in another country towards us.
Amazing.
I wish I could remember. There's a bar there where it's just filled with memorabilia. Maybe you've been. It's just filled with World War II memorabilia. Yep. And all these old pictures. It's amazing. Like it's almost like a snapshot back in time, right? And then all these people there, they just love the fact that you're an American, which is wild.
It's I remember seeing a video about that, and I thought it was the coolest video because I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was like, man, the people that I saw in that video were 80, 90 years old, in their suits, and I was like, man, like that is so rad that they just go through and they jump out with people for that. And I don't know how long ago I saw it, but I saw that and it's always like stuck in my head. I'm like, man, that is so awesome that they like still continue that type of like, celebration anniversary. I was like, man, it's just cool. I saw that and I was like, man, that's awesome. These guys are 80, 90 years old. Right. They're loving it. Like absolutely enjoy it. It's so cool. I mean, I could understand why you said that you never felt more like an American doing something like that because that would just give me goosebumps. Like that would be, I don't know. If I was on the verge of like getting out and I did something like that, I'd probably sign another enlistment, like that would like freaking give me so much more. Yeah. That's awesome.
Have you been to Normandy?
No. I think the furthest I've ever been over, like, probably Italy. Yeah. That's probably about it.
That's an extremely humbling experience for sure.
I would love it.
Just to go. But when you talk about like the footprint that America has on the world, getting stationed in Germany and working with some of the Germans, I learned a bunch of stuff about what Americans did while. From him growing up there, and the Americans occupying that area. And one of the cool things we did, and this is really small, but this kind of stuck with me because it stuck with him his whole life, is after the Americans started occupying Germany, they built all these soccer fields around all these German towns just to give the kids something to do. And all those soccer fields are still there. And that's kind of why, they have this appreciation is because they took the time to do something after the fact to take care of the community in that way, and I didn't even know that. And it's super small, right? But really cool at the same time.
What are some, we talked about some positive right there. What are, some like not so good moments or some moments that really stuck out that, you didn't know if you wanted to stay in as long as you have now, or like, man, I've only been in for 6 years and now I'm thinking about getting out, but like what kept you going? And then the second follow-up question is like, what were some things that, weren't so positive that were kind of like negative that, that you can remember throughout your career?
Yeah, it's easy, especially, me being a salty dude at this point. Like I can, I've a long list of negative things that I don't like, right? Like
For sure.
kids not having the same things that we're focused on that I don't think are correct. I can think about all these things, right?
Oh yeah.
But when it comes down to it, man, like the hardest things were the losses. The hardest things were losing my friends, right? And
Course.
going to those funerals and pounding your flash into a casket, like that is a thing that you'll never forget. Like typically I am, and this is going to come as a shock to people that don't know me very well, but I take on trauma a little bit too much. I'm a little bit too empathetic, although I don't show that outwardly. So all of those losses, even with just friends that I've worked with a little bit here and there, like those affect me in a very real way. Right? Trauma is a cup, right? So you have a glass, and every trauma fills that glass up a little bit, and you eventually get to a point where your glass just overfills and you can't take
Mm-hmm.
on that trauma anymore. And for me, my glass fills up a little bit more every time than the average dude. So every time that I took one of those losses, every time I saw one of my friends, that had a marriage fail, every time I saw one of my friends, mismanage their relationship with alcohol, which, to be quite frank with you, like we do
Yes.
in the military, like that's a
Happens
Yeah.
thing.
Absolutely.
Like
all the
Yeah.
time.
we self-medicate with alcohol entirely
We
too
do.
much. Um, when I saw my friends, hurting and failing like that, there were definitely times that I was just like, I don't know, man. But honestly, it was one of those things where even though I took those things on, and even though
Mhm.
like I didn't necessarily deal with them the best that I could, my love for the country, my love for what I thought was a righteous cause, what I still think is a righteous cause, is what kept me in.
All
I
day.
never once did I imagine being like, okay, that's it. I'm gonna take a knee. I'm gonna stop doing this thing. It was always like, hey, this really sucks. This is awful, but I got to keep going because we got work left undone.
Right.
So yeah,
So what are so some positives and not so good, and then did you hmm, did you ever think about like possibly commissioning, or did you want to just stay in the route that you're in right now?
first of all, don't you ever disrespect officers by implying that I could go over to be an officer. Number one, no, I'm an e-dog, man. I'm a
Yeah.
sled dog at heart. Like I'm a
Okay.
proud enlisted guy. I never thought for 1 second, and I don't want to take anything away from officers. I won't talk shit on them. I mean, maybe like when we don't
Mm-hmm.
continue to record, and I give my officer compartment,
Sure.
compatriots, a gang of shit, right? Because at
Sure.
this point, okay, fine. Um, but no, I always thought that I could be of more value as a sled dog. It's just more my personality. I don't possess the nuance. I don't possess the ability to swim in those circles.
Mm.
I'm very useful in a very narrow range. I am good at training teams to go downrange, taking them and bringing them back home. I'm good at making efficient teams operate a little bit more efficiently. I'm good at contingency planning. I'm good at those things. I don't know if I would be a good officer, so I never really entertained it. I had one person in my career, it was actually, so when I was getting ready to cross train, I worked for a full bird colonel, one of the most adept leaders that I ever worked for. She was a Haitian immigrant. She was about 5'1". Her name
Dang.
was Marie Charles, and she spoke in a Haitian accent that I won't do her the injustice of imitating. But for a week,
Safe. Smart.
when I put my packet in, yeah, right. When I put my packet in, Colonel Charles made me come into her office. She scheduled an hour out of her day every single day to talk to me, who was an E4 at the time. Every single day before she would sign off on it, she brought me in, my wife at the time. Every single day for an hour, she would come in and she told me how she wanted me to be an officer and she thought that she saw leadership potential in me. And every single day for 60 minutes, I would have to explain to her why I wanted to be a PJ. And at the end of that week, to her credit, she said, I disagree with you. I think this is the wrong career move, but I'm going to sign off on this packet because I want you to be an officer. She was probably the only one in my career that saw that in me.
Mm-hmm.
But from then I was sold. Like I'm a sled dog. I am an enlisted leader. I'm a proud sergeant. Sergeant means to serve. And, doing that part of the mission always spoke to me more than being an officer. So
And that term sergeant is one of the oldest military terms in the world. And
Amen,
it
brother.
does.
You're
Yeah.
dead
Yeah.
right, brother.
I mean, every branch pretty much all the way through.
Mhm.
It's like everybody wants that.
Well, not even just branch, like other countries' militaries.
That's
you know
true.
what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I honestly can say in the 13 years that I've been in that I've probably had 2 people sit me down to that degree that you just talked about and actually talk to me about the direction I wanted to take my career. And that's so rare. Especially I feel like even the 13 years I've been in, how much it's changed since I first came in.
Mhm.
I feel like we've gone more away from people wanting to sit down and mentor others to, and we could talk about, reasons why all day, but gone to more of a self-focused, goal, I guess.
Mhm.
But that's great. I
Mhm.
couldn't even imagine somebody saying to me, you need to explain to me, every day for 4 days for an hour why you want to be a PJ, or why you want to be a security
I
forces.
think it would be like
or,
repetitive.
Yeah. Well, no,
Yeah.
but sure. But
Well,
it's
and
like,
by the
gut checking
because
me.
she cared, because she
Right.
gave a shit.
Yeah, that's
Like
huge.
Yeah.
and it took me a little bit, of growing up, because at the time I was like, what are you doing here? Like, just let me go try this thing.
Mhm.
And it took a little bit of time, but as I look back on it, she
Yep.
cared about me so much that she gave me a full bird colonel, gave me 6 hours of her time over the course of a week to sit
Yeah.
down and talk to me and be like, I think that you need to look at it. Like, and then in the end had the maturity to go, okay, well, I'm going to let you accept this risk. I think she even told me, she's like, I think you're going to fail. And I'm going to tell you that because it's a 91% failure rate and you already tried it once.
Right.
She was like, you already tried and failed once, Aaron. What are you going to do? She was like, you think you're going to pass this time? And I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to. And okay, in the end, I was proven right. And as a younger man, I sort of I was petty about that. And I was like, oh, I added her to the list of people that thought I was going to fail. Wow. What an immature and naive way to think about that.
Sure.
She was one of the best leaders I ever had. And I'm thankful for the lessons that she taught me. And I think you're right. 100%, Brennan, is that, we are missing a little bit of that. We are missing some of those courageous leaders that'll sit you down and maybe tell you some things that you might not want to hear, but you need to hear them.
They're not. And that's real leadership, is being able to say the hard part out loud.
Yep.
And again, there's so few people that will sit there and say, hey man, here's how you suck, but we can do this to get better,
Agreed.
And most people would rather just tiptoe around the problem and not actually tell you what you need to do and kind of pat you on the bottom and just try to scoot you out the door. But I'm kind of curious, have you talked to her since then?
I haven't.
No,
I don't
wow.
even, as a matter of fact, so she was retiring shortly after that. I don't even think she knows that I graduated and made PJ. I don't even think she knows that I'm not sure that she knows that I succeeded in what I wanted to do. And that's been one of those things where I'm like, I've always kind of every time you know how things fade away and you don't think about things as much.
Yeah.
Every once in a while you'll come up and you'll be like, oh wow, remember that person that said that? I'd really like to follow up with them and see where they are. So maybe, you know what? I'll call this out right now here on this podcast. I'm going to track down Colonel Marie Charles, retired, wherever she is, and I will talk to her, and I will give her a
trail
thank you.
The 60-minute special, right? She's just gonna come out from behind a door, catch you in your office as you're leaving one day.
I'm telling you, she was odd. You know what's funny too is she was a full bird colonel, but we actually worked for the Med Group, which is this weird thing, this group of flyers that trained, my whole job was going with special operations teams to manage at altitude their O2 systems. My job as a phys tech was to protect them from oxygen related incidents as they were jumping above high altitudes. That was our job, but somehow we worked for the Med Group. So it was some weird thing. And then she was a full bird colonel. Yeah, it is.
Right.
Weird. So she was a full bird colonel, but she was a squadron commander. Our squadron was 15 people big. So it was the weirdest thing. We'd go into these meetings and people would big timer. And she started taking me to these meetings and I would lean over and I'd be like, hey man, don't let him talk to you like that. You flap those colonel wings right now and you call them.
Yeah.
And it was funny too, because she would, it was funny because and this is the one impression I'll do of her accent. She'll go, Aaron, I flapped my colonel wings and I told them, no, not today. And I'd be like, yeah, get him, man.
Awesome.
I was like,
That's
you
awesome.
get it. I was her A dog. I was standing there. They would say something. I'd be like, A dog, I wouldn't let them talk to you like that.
He's the cool lawyer.
Look at your shoulder. Look at them birds on your shoulder. You think they're allowed to talk to you like that?
Yeah.
she would totally do it. It was awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, not to turn the corner so fast, but I want to get everyone's insight on what's going on and what we're going to be talking about on this podcast too. I guess I'm just kind of excited to talk about it.
Mhm.
You know, three people in here that just, in my opinion, you know, have the same views, share certain opinions.
Sure.
But with everything going on right now, pretty much with Russia, Ukraine, China, USA, you know, you can even start off back when it happened, you know, February 24th of last year. You know, I remember specifically, Gresham and I were talking, and God, this was like a month before maybe it happened or something like that. And, you know, everything was like leading up to where we're going to talk about right now. But I was telling people nothing is going to happen until after the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, what makes you think about that? I'm like, well, because all these countries have all these athletes in this one designated area. Just imagine if, you know, shit were to hit the fan, right? Nobody could fly home. Everybody's stuck. You got people from all these countries. And I was like, as soon as it's done and everybody is back home, that's when it's going to go down. And then sure as shit, the next day, everything went off, right? So it was almost like wow, like, are we actually going to go to war with Russia? Like what are we going to do? You know, we're doing this whole proxy war now. So from back then up, I guess start from the beginning. You know, like what was your whole take on, you know, what was going on? You know, whatever your opinion might be, the reasoning behind, you know, Russia trying to go back and get the Soviet Union again and trying to take back all these countries. And then now we're doing the same thing. Like, hey, we've got Ukraine's back. This is what we're going to do. So, you know, what does Aaron think? Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, you have to back it up even further, right? So America's strength on the international stage is granted through deterrence and deterrence only. Right. You cannot have deterrence without consequence, right? So the problem here really started in August of 21. And in August of 21, we started, or it was actually the long end of the Afghanistan withdrawal. So this really started in around November of 20. To where on the world stage, the giant of America that will kill you where you sleep. All right. So we went from a president that would sit down with a world leader. We sat down with Xi at Mar-a-Lago. And before he had chocolate cake, he sat down, the president at the time, sat down and looked at another world leader and was like, hey, I just launched 40 cruise missiles in Syria to make sure to kill some people that crossed us. Have a nice chocolate cake. If you try to do this to us, I'm going to first find you in downtown and I'm going to turn your house into rubble. That's what deterrence
What
is,
a power
right?
move. Yes.
It is a power move. And listen, I want to be super clear about this. And I don't understand why people cannot have two thoughts in their head at the same time. I'm not a Trump guy. My feelings on Trump and my feelings on politics in general, like, listen, he had some good parts. He had a lot of bad parts. I have a lot of bad feelings about him. People always put me in like the other camp of like, oh, he's a Trump guy or he's a Republican. No, I'm not. I'm quite frankly not. Okay. However, deterrence through consequence is important. When you know that we will kill Soleimani via airstrike for daring to fuck around with us on the world stage, that makes people go, oh, maybe I don't do any incursions. So when you have the entire fallout of Afghanistan, and we just did, 2 hours with the guys, the team leaders that were on the ground at HKIA, and they talked about their entire deployment of the entire JTE, and really what we should call it is a retreat. We call it these flowery terms, a joint tactical exit, and we call it the exit of Afghanistan. It's not. No. It was a retreat. In the dead of night, we cut our crap and we bounced and we left all of our gear and we left some people and we did some very bad things. That's what a retreat looks like. So that set the stage for November of 2020. And as we get into like the winter of 2020 and then early into 2021, if you'll remember, somebody asked President Joe Biden, hey, so what happens if Russia crosses this red line? Like the Olympics were going on and, dead on, Chris, great call there. Like, hey, this isn't happening until after the Olympics. You're dead right. That was a great read of the scenario. But what preceded that was the president going, well, I don't know. Maybe if they incur a little bit, I don't know. What are we going to do? What are we not going to do? We had one administration that was like, if you cross me, I'll freaking kill you. I will murder you, and I'm starting with you. I'm looking at you, Putin. I'm looking at you, Xi. I'm looking at you. We had a president that crossed the DM with Kim Jong-un. We had a president that had the Abraham Accords, peace in the Middle East for the first. He should have gotten a Nobel Prize for that. And again, I'm not a fan of the dude.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I'm gonna steal a quote from a couple other conservative dudes out there. Like, President Trump was not the murderer of democracy. He was not the murderer of that office. He was the coroner. He was the guy that came in after that stuff was already dead. And he acted the way that he acted, and whatever else. I'm not endorsing anybody, by omission or by admission, either way. However, we lost deterrence. We lost that hammer. Like, you can't have. I liken it to CQC. I liken it to. I'm a combatives guy. I'm a combatives instructor. I'm a jiu-jitsu player. You can never be more mean. You can always be nicer. At the beginning of any interrogation, at the beginning of any fight, I can start off way more violently than you. Mm-hmm. And then if I ratchet it down because I understand, like, if you don't give me the same input, I can go, okay, well, now I'm going to be nice. And you're like, oh, geez, I thought you were going to kill me. And I know that you had that in you, but now we can have a civil conversation. You can't do it the other way. And what happened with this administration is we tried to do it the other way. We're like, well, I mean, if you incur a little bit, we might do something, we might not. And now we're backed into a corner where now we're trying to talk tough and it's not working. You know why? Because they know that we're not going to do anything. So that's what got.
What you're talking about is controlled aggression, and if I know there's an implication of violence, let's just say, that exists between you and I, because you've set that boundary up. I know up to a point where I can go and where I should not go unless I want to incur, like you said, those consequences. That is exactly that's not even something that happens on an international stage. We do that, person to person all the time. You know what I mean?
All the time.
And it's natural. It's the way human beings interact and have interacted for as far back as we've existed, and like you said, you started off on the weakest foot you probably could. And now you're trying to move in, and now you're trying to be tough in this situation when everybody knows that's not the face you put on.
And I hate that.
That's not what you're going to do.
I hate that look so much, man. Cause it's like, obviously I hate to even call it a career, but I mean, it's from the time that I've been in up until now, it's like, man, like, this is like not what it was when I was growing up, like, I just feel like we're so much more weak. And I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I'm just like, man, like, what's going to happen? Like, you back us into a corner, typically I would assume that lion's going to come out. You back us into that corner,
kind of waiting for that to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, like how the military has been closer to now these times, different branches go on different rotations. Right. But, to not rewind so far, but World War I, World War II, like those 17, 18-year-olds, they come home until the war was over.
Right.
You're not gonna catch this 6-month deployment or this 14-month deployment. It's like, you're not coming home until this war is over. And like, what happens going forward now with everything, it's like, it's like, I want to make sure that these younger kids like coming in are going to be ready. And then in the sense of like it looking so weak, people, it's just like, it's like a whirlwind of like emotions of like where I wish we're going to go being stronger. Because it's just, I don't know.
Here's the thing too. I feel like is if here, you can go ahead if you want.
No. Go ahead. Send it.
I was just going to say that it feels like to me that so many people see almost like a plan unfolding in front of us. And I kind of feel like sometimes this administration, President Joe Biden, his administration, don't see that. And I don't know if this is some sort of, play ignorance to get people to think you don't know what's going on. But to me, it's so evident. This isn't even the first time that Russia's been into Ukraine. This happened in 2014?
2014. Yeah, the annexation of Crimea.
Right. So it's almost like this stuff is it just keeps ratcheting up, and they're the ones showing the aggression, ratcheting that up, and not matching that. But to me, it's this all feels like it's part of a grander scheme, and we're not doing the necessary things to counteract that, in my opinion. Like, look, like, what was it? Honduras yesterday just said basically, hey, we no longer recognize Taiwan as a country. We now recognize a unified China, and right. And Where is
Well, and
Honduras?
it's
It's the
BRICS,
south of our country.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
dude.
it's the
Yes.
BRICS alliance, and I'll tell you what. You're totally right, Brennan. And for number one, the thing that you're describing is that we all know what basic military doctrine is. Like everybody in the world that is worth a shit knows what dime fill is, right? You have diplomatic, you've got informational, you've got military power, you've got economic power. Like dime fill is a whole thing, right? There's supposed to be a playbook that we use. And when you watch an administration completely and totally discount a playbook that everybody knows, you've undermined your entire diplomatic power by not brokering a peace deal. When I watched China broker a peace deal between two hated rivals of Saudi Arabia and Iran, that is terrible. That's terrible for a number of different reasons, because now the BRIC alliance, so BRICK, so what is it? Bolivia, India,
Brazil,
China,
I think, right?
Or Brazil, India, China, Korea, or Brazil, Russia, India, China,
And South
Korea,
Africa.
BRICS. And South Africa.
Yeah.
Guess what? Thanks to China making that alliance, now they're talking about trading oil in yuan and not the American dollar.
Right.
If we get off the petrodollar for trading in oil, bad news, ladies and gents. Half of our national money, half of our national currency goes away in a heartbeat. Guess who owns the other half via debt?
China.
Yep. And this has been coming for a long time. You know, back even talking about 2014, you can see this coming. Not even almost, you can see this coming. Russia moved all this gold and gave it to China to back their yuan. It's a gold backed currency. And the plan has been for this a long time.
How many Russian banks have failed? We're going through a worldwide bank failure, right? How many Russian banks have failed?
Zero.
Zero.
I was reading up on that earlier. You guys are talking about like the currency dropping, and you know, because my wife and I, I'm telling her like some things that I'm hearing and that I'm researching and stuff, and it's one of those things where like if that Federal Reserve like does crash, they're expecting it to this year, of course, they're talking about putting your assets into like gold or putting like your money into gold and different assets because of what is
silver.
Silver.
I want to say 17 states have moved to like they're pushing to move to a silver backed currency because we moved away from gold in the 70s. We moved away from the gold standard and we made the Fed that can just like the Fed, money printer go like whatever. Like the memes are hilarious. The fiat currency system that we're in right now, and J Powell running the Fed and continually saying that we have infinite money from the Fed. So to watch somebody from the Fed say that we just have infinite money and we can just print it, like Venezuela has entered the chat, idiots. Like, do you guys understand what you're going to do with devaluing the entire currency of a nation?
A simple Google search would show you bread lines and people starving to death in numerous countries because of inflation. Look at throw it back, man. Weimar Republic, Germany, inflation, right? There's so many parallels between us and the Weimar Republic right now. It's wild. And inflation is probably one of the bigger ones. It's a problem.
The biggest one.
It is.
The inflation is a tax on taxpayers like that. Like inflation is a tax from the country to the taxpayers because it costs you more to do everything every time. And I can't believe like to watch the people. So I get a lot of trolls and it's hilarious.
You do.
I love
the stuff that you put up.
I don't
It cracks me up.
I hope that there's always the hope that, all of your enemies listen to these things when you get to talk them into the air. And I know that that's not true. It's going to be my fans listening to this, if there is any of them. So to both of you that are listening to me right now, thanks. But the fact that they cannot like just look at a situation and go, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. It's very clear. If there's more money chasing less goods, that's inflation. Inflation was at 1.4%. in November of 2020. Something happened. It went up to 9.1% in July of 2022, and now it's at 6.8% year over year in 2023. That is bad. The Fed just they're still trying to tamp down inflation by raising insurance rates to try to tamp this inflation down. It's not getting any easier, and it's leading to stagflation. More money chasing less goods with an overheated economy with too much money pumped into it. And our answer is build back better. The infrastructure bill, another couple of trillion. How much did we get for COVID again? It was like two $1,600.
Yeah.
I remember getting a $2,400 check because I had another adult and two children in my
got the
household,
same
and we just
check.
got $2,400.
Yep.
I will
what?
tell you guys
Dude,
from my experience with that, right? The relief program.
Mhm.
So this is very wild. Make a long story short. I ended up getting that, and I was in the debt program before I joined the military. And what is it? You sign up for unemployment, right? You get unemployment, and then you get the during that time was the relief program. And I got a check, obviously, well, direct deposit. Sorry, I got a direct deposit, hit the bank, right? I look over at my wife and I said, "There's no way this is my unemployment." So this was in Texas. God, I must have received this for like 6 months.
Okay.
And I was getting, I think it was $4,600 or $4,800 a month because of the relief program.
Holy crap.
Myself, married with one kid. I called the IRS and I'm like, "Hey, I want to make sure this is correct before I get nailed in the end."
Audited.
She starts laughing. She starts laughing over the phone. Is like, "No, that's correct. It's part of the relief program." I said,
"Whoa.
So
this is what I'm going to get every month?" She was like, "Yeah." She's like, "You're going to get it for about 6 months or until it runs out." I said to myself, "Holy shit."
Imagine. And can you do me a favor? Just back it up. When did you vote on that? As somebody that's an American citizen that should be voting on what Congress spends their money on? Can you tell me when you voted?
Vote.
Yeah. I think it was like an email. I must have went to my junk box.
You know what it was? It was
not had service at the
incentivizing
time.
people not to work. It was paying people to stay at home.
We say that
for
so
nothing.
Yeah, all the time. I felt awful.
Yep.
I mean, I have integrity, and so like when I saw that, I'm like, damn, like I'm making $4,800 a month doing absolutely nothing for something I had no clue about, or like like how Aaron just said, I didn't vote for this.
Yeah.
And I have friends that have bachelor degrees working on their career that are making less than I am, and I'm at home doing F all, and then obviously taking care of my son, and my wife's at work. I was making more than my wife was, and she was working. I'm at home chilling.
Dude, that's what they want, man. When you have people that have grandparents that are on welfare and then your parents are on welfare, it's no longer assistance, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah. They want you to rely on the government.
Yep.
And that's when that's where they get you. They're like, "Hey, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it."
Yeah.
And
an electric stove, we won't turn the grid off.
Yeah, exactly. And
man, you guys are throwing too many topics out here. We're gonna have to parse these out one at a time.
We got it. No, you're right. Like, we'll slow down.
All right, pick it. You go.
No. Like I think you're dead on, right? So the government is supposed to do three basic things, right? Period. The government is supposed to do three basic things. You protect the border to make sure that we're a sovereign nation.
Not happening.
Number one, that's what we're supposed to do. Okay.
Yep.
Number two, you provide a minimum social safety net. So you provide services for citizens that they collectively could not provide on their own. And now this is where we get kind of wonky, where we start talking about, okay, well, what should the government do, and yada, yada, yada. And then number three, it upholds the Constitution of the United States for all citizens and provides them what they're supposed to have, as in the documents that we commonly refer to as the golden apple inside of the silver frame, which is the Constitution inside of that Bill of Rights, right? That is who we are as a nation. When you start talking about item 2, when you start talking about providing the minimum social safety net possible for people to have things provided that they couldn't do on their own, right? Like the three of us, no matter how smart, no matter how intelligent, no matter how resourceful we are, we cannot come up with a health system. We need doctors for that. We need some, whatever. Okay, got it. Okay. Like highways, large projects, things that are outside of the scale of really what the states were meant to provide. The states are supposed to be like these small little countries, right? So when you think about states, you think about Europe. Europe is a better example to think about what America is supposed to be. Like you have Europe, but really there's England and France and Germany and, the Scandinavian countries and all these other Ireland, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Those things are supposed to be independent and govern one another. That's what America is supposed to be. We have that perverted. The federal government is supposed to be, well, number one, as small as possible, but number two, they're supposed to provide a very narrow set of things in order to help the states do things that the states shouldn't have to do. For instance, an interstate highway system. For instance, infrastructure to support interstate travel. For instance, security at the border so that we have a sovereign nation that is our own and is protected. We have completely lost sight of that. When the federal government starts paying people not to work, people assume that that is what's owed to them from the federal government. And the only thing it breeds, and Brandon, you were straight on, the only thing it breeds is dependence. When you have a big government that incentivizes people not to go to work, that incentivizes people to not strive for the American dream, every single state that is receiving the states that are most receptive of government funds, guess what? They're the poorest states. It's like Alabama, Missouri, Arkansas. There's like 4 or 5 southern states that receive the most in federal funding, and they're also the poorest states in the nation. If that is not a referendum on how well the American government funds states and what funding is supposed to do, I don't know what is. It is a case study in the terrible, terrible execution of federally funded programs. Federally funded programs, the only thing that they do is create wards of the state. You can see it from welfare. You can see it from the education system. Every single thing that the federal government touches turns to absolute gluttonous, overblown crap. It's why you have toilet seats that cost $800 and hammers that cost $1,000.
Right.
It's why you have military programs that cost $2 trillion when their exact counterpart in the civilian space is doing it for 1/10 of the cost and having 100% more return. This was laid out in the Kill Chain perfectly. If you haven't read the book Kill Chain,
that's a great book.
You should go do so. It talks about innovate. We got Elon Musk and Amazon fighting each other for who can have more space missions quick. What was the last manned NASA mission that we sent up? When have we been back to the moon? You know why?
We haven't.
Yeah. Because government programs can't figure it the F out. Dan Holloway at Citizen Pod, which is a good friend. I was on Citizen Pod. He's an awesome dude and a patriot. He said it best. If you want to box the government out at every single level, figure out what they're doing and then do it better. Because the federal government was never meant to subsidize individual citizens to stay at home for a perceived health emergency. That's not what the federal government is supposed to do. And it breeds a dependence. It breeds people that are just constantly involved in those programs. That steals from them. And it steals the most important thing. And it doesn't steal money. It doesn't steal whatever. It steals the American dream.
Your liberty.
The American dream of individual freedom and your personal liberty is that no matter who you are, we have equality. Equity. We have equality. Everybody is an American. You are allowed to make your own way. You are allowed to earn your own keep. You might fail. However, you might succeed past your wildest dreams. And when we have social systems that support people to avoid the American dream and they don't have to try and they just get paid for doing nothing, that is robbing them of something that is inherent to us and only us. And it makes us the greatest country in the world, is that American dream that you can pull yourself up by the bootstraps and you can succeed in the face of immense failure and risk. And when you pay people to stay at home and when you incentivize them to do nothing, and when you give them food stamps and when you give them all of these things, that's not what we're supposed to be. And we've lost sight of that a little bit. And now we're paying the penalty through inflation and through these gluttonous systems and through these gluttonous programs that we have. Now we're paying the penalty and we're seeing real problems. And the good thing is that people are starting to wake up. You know, when you're paying $8 for a dozen eggs and people are like, well, whoa, what do we do? We're like, well, I mean, that's the COVID spending bill. That's Build Back Better. That's all,
interest rates for homes.
Yeah. That dude, interest rates for homes. I mean, if you look back in the 1980s, interest rates for home were 9-12%. Like that was, they were super duper high. Like, okay, tight. Like, we
Yeah.
getting an interest rate of like 2% was ridiculous. We did that for 2 decades, and I don't even know how. It was post the housing bubble burst, 2008. However, when you start looking at like real cost, like the actual take home pay and year over year inflation and the consumer price index, like those things, holy crap, they're wildly out of control in comparison and per capita and all this other stuff. And the gaslighting by the administration is just like, well, it's corporate greed and they're price gouging. So and I love like the whole price gouging thing, like this whole narrative. Like, let me just get this straight. So nobody before November of 2020 was price gouging. But then in November of 2020, everybody from oil and gas and finance and, agriculture, everybody got together and they decided now's the time. Let's price gouge and let's charge people more. And corporate greed is causing inflation. What a ridiculous thing. It's a simple concept. Too much money that we've printed more money in the last 3 years than has ever existed in the history of the nation. More money chasing fewer goods, which we have 100% retarded. And I mean that in the actual sense, like we've held back American production through energy and production and goods and services. We have 100% put a vice grip on them. So when you have too much money and not enough goods, you get inflation. Elections have consequences.
Basic
and I can tell you when it started. Like, people that don't know the names Thomas Sowell or Morgan Freeman.
He's a good actor.
Yeah, yes. I wish I could do a good Morgan Freeman voice because I would put it there. Milton Freeman. But like Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell, if you don't know their basic tenets of stuff, like you're an idiot. I can tell you when it started. It started in November of 2020, and people can't hold like two thoughts in their head at the same time, and it's frustrating to watch our fellow countrymen just be like, "Wow, I don't know where this is all coming from. I guess these corporations are really greedy, huh?" And you're like, "Well, I mean, do you think it's because we increased our national budget from 4 trillion to a proposed 7 trillion in a single year, and we've increased from 17 trillion to 31 trillion over the course of 3 years? Do you think that had anything to do with it?" And they're like, "Nope, orange man bad." And you're like, "What are we talking about?"
Mean
guys?
tweets.
Yeah.
No, and I just want to touch on two of the things you said, right? So you said you can pinpoint when it started, right? The media is so good at keeping people's thought processes and what they remember so short, right? There's always a new distraction. There's always something else going on. They forget really quickly that none of this is new, right? Things like this have happened before. There's patterns. You can watch this stuff happen. But the other part of it that you said, right, is when you have this dependence, this codependence on the government, you're robbing human beings of one of the greatest things we have as beings in general, is failure, right? We did not get to where we're at every day by just succeeding all the time, man. Somebody ate the wrong fucking berries and now we don't go over there, right? We figured out how to turn wooden tools into bronze tools, into iron tools, right? And so when you're doing that, you're robbing people of the added benefit of failure. And some people don't get that failure is a benefit, because it really is. You're learning what you're doing wrong. You know what I mean? But when you're taking risk, like you said, going out there, the government doesn't want you to do that. They keep you on the teat, so to speak. You're robbing people of things that the opportunity to go and be better and be great, right? And it's just, I don't understand. I've never understand how people don't actually see that, but I think it also creates this desire to stay that way. It's stagnance. It's also something that contributes, I feel like, is like this national nihilism that we all are kind of going through right now. People don't care. They think things don't matter. They want to blame it on everybody else, which is just typical of somebody who thinks that nothing is important outside of their little circle. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I mean, I said national nihilism, and I really feel like that is a real thing. Like, what do you think?
I agree.
Dude, totally agree. Couldn't agree more. Like the victim versus victor mentality, and these things that we connected to, just as Americans. Like when we grew up, what was the most popular video game we played growing up? Maybe not for you guys, but definitely for me.
Mario?
Oregon Trail.
Oh my God. You
Oh,
have died
floppy
of
disk?
typhoid.
I'm
Yeah,
old. I'm
man.
old, dog. I'm old. I played
Yeah.
that shit on floppy disk, guys.
Yeah.
But
I
like,
did
what was
too.
that about? That was about forging your way and
Yeah.
literally being
Surviving.
we grew up on American culture. We grew up on
Yeah.
cowboys.
We
We
did.
grew up on, you went and you looked for gold, and sometimes you had to get into a gunfight. Freedom comes with risk.
Right.
That's what people think, that freedom is completely disassociated from risk. And they're like, the Second Amendment talks and the First Amendment talks that I've had with people, and some of these other ones, like they seem to want to try to eliminate risk from freedom at all turns. And I'm like, no. Listen, if you want to be completely free of risk, I can tell you, and I'll use a lion as an example. If you want to be the most free that you can from risk as a lion, you should be in a zoo. You're going to be in a cage, but somebody's going to feed you. You're not going to have to
I had the
worry
same
about where
thought.
your next fight's coming from. You're going to be completely isolated, and you'll be there by yourself. A lion out in the Serengeti, he's going to have to fight other lions. He might starve to death, whatever, but that lion is free. That lion is a free lion, but it comes with risk.
Yep.
And the fact that we have gotten to a place, and you mentioned it earlier, Brennan, and man, I can't give you enough kudos for this, but when we start talking about a society that is so privileged that we worry about the problems that we have, that is the most ridiculous thing. You're worrying about pronouns right now. There are
Dude,
kids in Africa worrying about dying in a lithium mine.
Right.
And you're over here on your
Yep.
iPhone complaining that somebody misgendered you at your job at Starbucks, that you're lobbying to have a 20-hour minimum wage.
That
Do
they'll
me a
send that
favor.
tweet from their phone that has the cobalt those kids are mining, right? In it.
The absolute ridiculousness of it.
They
If you
want to
just step
complain.
back,
Mm-hmm.
if you just step back for a second, like, all freedom comes with risk. Everything that we do comes with a trade-off. You whether you know it or not, you put your own life into your hands every single day that you get into a car and you decide that you're going to drive to work, because you could die on the way to work. But somehow you're like, okay, well, cool, this job is more important to me, and I've done a risk analysis. But we start talking about these things, that we're kind of like owed, and we're like, okay, well, I don't think that it's worth the risk. And we start talking about like our rights and stuff as we start, exploring what is risky and what is not. To get it back all the way to what we're kind of talking about here, I just don't understand where the government is supposed to take away all risk. And we did it with the lockdowns, and we did it with some of this other stuff where the government was like, no, we're going to protect you from everything. And we were like, no, I'm going to make the choice. I'm going to go out into this environment and I'll wear what I want to wear. And you can't tell me what to take into my body. You can't tell me what to wear on my face, and, all this other stuff. And people freaked out like it was something that it was like, well, for the greater good, you have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
No. That's not what America's about. America
Exactly.
is sometimes, like Oregon Trail, you get into a wagon with your family and you strike out to an unknown place and you try to make a new spot for yourself. Paying people to, like, imagine like the government at that time was like, oh, you want to go on the Oregon Trail? Well, tell you what, how about we pay your family $100 just to stay home in New York, and we're just going to make everybody live in New York. Don't worry about what's out west. No, you'd get into a gunfight over that. You like, no, screw you. I'm gonna go look at the Western territories. Like, I think there's a life for us out there in Utah or California or Oregon or Washington or wherever. And we've lost that a little bit, and we've done it through comfort. Hard men make easy times. Easy men make easy men make weak times, or weak men make hard times. And that's we are here, like in the slippery slope of, like, we've had some pretty easy times because some hard men had to make some hard choices about what we were doing. And now we've created some pretty easy times, and that's created some pretty weak men. And you're like here. And we're about to have some hard times because of it. And, we're seeing it worldwide, like Canada. And, I'm probably supposed to call him Trudeau, but he's actually Castro's son. But anyway, like Trudeau and what he's doing. 100%. So Trudeau and what he's doing in Canada, and watching Macron in France, and thank goodness the people of France are standing up. And they're not going to say this on mainstream news, but there's millions of people protesting right now. They're burning France to the ground.
I saw a video of a bunch of police there in the gendarme in France, taking their helmets off, taking their gear off, and getting right in there with them. Yeah. Dude, I like that kind of unity because it sends a message. You know what I mean? It is. Dude, it's I don't know, man. It's we learned a lot about what we know as a country, like liberty, freedom from France, historically. And so seeing these issues, they're not old or they're not new issues. You know what I mean? Right. And those people there obviously have been through a lot in the same way, that we have, from fighting for liberty and all that. But it's inspiring to see other countries get fed up with big government, because we're not the only ones with, like you like to say, like government overreach.
Yeah, exactly. I saw videos and pictures of that because it's literally just happened going on. And it's like, wow. Like you said, like the word unity is like the best thing right there because those people are coming together. And then I did see the video of the police officers, literally helmet to the side, geared up, just walking with everybody, and man, it's so crazy what has happened since 2020.
Well, I think that opened the door worldwide for a lot of control, and it's very obvious that COVID opened that door for it because there's a perfect excuse to try and say this is for your safety, like you said. Safety is not the best thing all the time, taking risk like you just were saying, not to beat a dead horse, but I think it did. I think it opened that door. And if you can't, to me, this is just Brandon Gresham's opinion, right? But if you can't see that has opened all these other doors for other things, like I can't help you. And Pandora's I think box. Pandora's box, but it's
those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty or safety. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, when you start calling things like, and you look at, the government overreach, Jordan Peterson did a better job of explaining it than I ever could. But incrementally, they start encroaching on these freedoms, right? So we had a pandemic, and now the fungal thing is popping up where people are like, oh no, there's a fungus that's coming out that's really dangerous and it's starting to spread. We're starting to label everything. Like, do you know that we're still under executive order for emergency powers in the United States due to COVID? Yep. That still isn't done yet. Okay, that's weird. So what else are we calling a public health emergency? Well, now the CDC is called gun violence.
Yeah.
A public health emergency. Oh, how weird. What a weird thing to try to explore. I didn't realize that was a public health emergency. There's a lot of lying in data. There's a lot of manipulating and gaslighting some things that are involved in that. But it all ties back into the same thing is, well, it's for the greater good, everybody. I need you to do this thing, not for yourself. I need you to put this mask on to protect everybody else. And now through the optic of time and through the optic of hindsight, we've been able to look back and go, no, that was bullshit. That was never a thing. The Cochrane study completely deaded that. We can pull a million videos, and I don't want to get you guys demonetized. So let's say that there was an experimental medical procedure that the government told you would stop transmission of a certain thing. And we found out that was bullshit. And it was 100% bullshit. And I can provide you all of the receipts of these things that were never true. And it was all housed under the auspices of, this is for the greater good. This is for somebody else. The narrative at that point, and you can put everything under the umbrella, and I'm going to tie it up for you in a little bow here, but that's when the narrative changed. It used to be in America, you make your own way, you make your own risk, you do your own thing as an individual private citizen. It all changed in 2020. And now everything was for the greater good. Everything was for somebody else. You need to protect your fellow man. You need to do this for your community. Make sure that you're standing 6 feet away from somebody so that you don't kill grandma. That was never a thing before 2020.
Yeah.
Before 2020, it was protect yourself, make sure that you're healthy, like make sure all these other things. It was never, we're all in this together. It was never do this for your family. It was
A bunch
never
of fear
keep your
mongering
kid.
too.
It was never keep your kids out of school so
Mm-mm.
that they don't infect grandma when they get home. That's nonsense. That's not what we're like. Freedom comes with risk. If you want to go out, I got to be honest. I went out in my community and I didn't bother wearing the face thingy, and I had no issue with it. And anybody that didn't want to provide me, I had a distinct interaction at a gas station that I walked in and they were like, "Hey, you need to put that thing on," and I was like, "Nah, I'm just grabbing this thing. I'm going to be out of here. You're behind plexiglass. You have yours on. I'm fine." And they were like, "Well, we're not going to serve you." So I took a $5 bill for my Monster or whatever I was drinking, and I showed it to the camera and I put it on the counter and I was like, "Here you go. I'm walking out. You can either put this in your cash register or you can't.
Yeah.
I don't care." And that's what it is. But that all changed in 2020, and it's been this slow incremental move to change the national discourse for what all of these things are.
Yep.
And
That's
it's
what I
not
was getting
and
at.
they're and they're doing the same thing. Yeah, no, you totally set the table for me, and I just like talking because I like the sound of my voice.
Me too. Yeah, keep it going.
And now they're doing it with guns too, and they'll do it with whatever other social issues that they want to push.
Yep.
It's not that, like, God forbid, and again, I don't want to get you guys in too much trouble, but God forbid you look at the gun deaths. One of the most ridiculous narratives out there right now. What's the number one killer of children in America? And people will tell you it's firearms.
Mm-hmm.
It most certainly isn't. The number one killer of children in America right now is abortion. Period. Like, that's easy to look at.
Dude.
No, that's it.
Hit him right there, man. No.
No.
I like
that's
it.
It has been for a while. I think in 2020 or 2021, it was like 600 some thousand deaths of like
just
abortions.
in New York. Just in New York, the number one killer of children in America in New York City is like, there's 3,000 gun deaths or something in kids in America.
I remember
However,
that.
when they say kids, they mean 18 and under.
Right.
If you select out it, here's a fun way to play with statistics. Take Chicago out of that, and then take anybody that's 13 to 18 out of that, and the number drops below 500. It drops way below 500. And then if you take other bigger city centers out and you lower that number to what we actually think a kid is, like 9, and you take it to like accidents, it goes to double digits.
Yeah.
But, if you want to look at New York, like, I'm happy to Google the New York abortions, but it's like 800,000 nationwide in a year. And then if you look at like just New York, it's like 50,000. That's 10,000 times gun death and accidents, even if we include everybody up to 18 and we don't include the 40 people that are shot every weekend in Chicago, 15 to 30 of which are 13 to 18-year-old. Yeah, but we can't talk about that.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, like, if you really want to get deep into what the problems are in America, like, we can look at it and we can talk about it, but people don't want to have those conversations.
They don't want to hear the truth. It upsets their feelings, but it's what's going on real time, real world. And it's just, whatever flavor of the month is for everything, right?
Yeah. So media is really, really good at distractions and taking people down ways that aren't actually accurate, But going back to, I love that you brought up the Jordan Peterson thing, talking about encroaching upon what you find comfortable and then backing away, and then each time pushing the envelope until you can get away with a little bit more and get away with a little bit more, and then I think he likes to say "gotcha" all the time because Jordan Peterson is Canadian and they say that. So, but they do, but. It's true. And that's what I was getting at with the pandemic opened these doors about, we're all this global community. No, sure, we're on the same planet, but that's not how people think about things. And that's the narrative that they want pushed so that people feel like, like you said, this is for the greater good. This is for, this is for grandma, so to speak, and it's not actually for the greater good. It's for control. And you 100%. Can't tell me any different. You can't tell me any different when you're coming for, my ability to say something and you want to censor me. When you're coming for my ability to own a firearm, right? No knock warrants, all this other crap that we could really talk about, like those are infringements on rights, right? And that's what it's about, in my opinion, is about taking away inalienable rights. And Inalienable means that they are yours. No piece of paper gives them to you. They are yours naturally. That's what
Right.
that means.
Thank goodness. They're not even yours naturally. They're inherent in your being,
Mm-hmm.
given to you by a creator that cannot be
Mm-hmm.
questioned. When we say
Right.
remain self-evident, that means that they're unable to be questioned. These
Yep.
rights remain self-evident. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then the Bill of Rights is the silver frame
Yep.
outside of that golden apple that we call the Constitution of the
I'm pretty
United
sure,
States of America.
it got written down, Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot when.
Yeah, we did a good job. We did a good job of writing those things down. And that's the thing too. And again, like you can house this in whatever conversation you want. You can talk about gun rights, or man, I'm happy to expand it to prisoners' rights in the 13th and 14th Amendment. I'm happy to
Mhm.
talk about illegal search and seizure in the 4th. I'm happy to talk about the way that we
That
go
one.
about legislation and prosecuting people in the 5th. I'm happy to talk about all of these.
Mhm.
Like, I'm happy to talk about whatever thing that you want. But the real question, the real shift has been away from the individual. And that's what we have focused on when the founders made this nation. What they wanted was to solidify, explain, and implement a system that focuses on individual rights. Their intent was never to default to the state. And the
Mhm.
remarkable shift that has happened is that people have had and you can see it in every narrative, and I call it out all the time. When people are like, listen, no one should have weapons of war. Nobody should have a gun that is meant for war, except for the military and the police.
Right.
Stop. You're not anti-gun. That means you're pro-state. That
Yeah.
means you want the monopoly of violence to rest in the state control. You're not anti-gun at all. You just want who you think the good guys are to have the gun. I want individual, like that is a pro-state argument. When you talk about, I want you to take this experimental medical procedure for the good of the country. Imagine if I started using terms like, you have to take this experimental medical procedure for the good of the comrades. You have to take this experimental medical procedure for the good of the motherland.
Listen, comrade, you don't need your farmland anymore. The
Yeah.
government needs your
Thank you.
farmland.
Everybody
What's
needs
yours
your
is
farmland.
mine.
Yeah.
There's no point to have
This
individual
land is
personal
your
property
land.
rights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. So that's when the narrative is shifted to a point where we are literally changing how it is that we even talk, where people are like this collectivist nature. And it started again a long time ago with, it takes a village to raise a child. No, the fuck it does not. It takes a family to raise a child, and then other families make a community, and then hopefully you have a tribe inside of that community that can all raise your child. But
That
when you look at
village
the
should be people
education
you
system,
trust.
exactly, and when you look at the education system of today and you see the fight that's happening on the educational line, they're like, no, you give us your kids for 10 hours a day and let me indoctrinate them to whatever it is that I see fit, and I get to tell them about whatever it is that I want, and you shouldn't have access to it.
I'm sure you saw.
No.
Well, there's that pastor or whatever here in California that just got caught. Project Veritas, him setting up.
Oh yeah.
Yep. And then I'm sure you probably
We
saw
don't hire Catholics. Oh wow,
Right.
by religious.
Yep.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then who was the other chick that was like, well, I don't know her pronouns. I guess I'm not supposed to call her a chick, but like the other
We'll call her a
person that
chick.
was
I
like,
think it's pretty safe.
yeah, fine. She was a chick. She's presenting as a female.
There you go.
But essentially she was like, hey, when you're you don't have the ability to tell us what to teach inside of school as a parent. You shouldn't be able to tell us what's going on. Are you joking? You're a public official. I pay you with my tax dollars.
Right.
Not a chance, dude.
People have messed this up so bad. I'm a private citizen. The government should know zero about me. You're a public official, meaning you get paid by the government. I should know everything about what you're doing, what you're talking about, what you're teaching, what your curriculum is, who you're being paid by.
Yeah, that just further drives home that point that you're talking about, that the collective and big government has become a culture. When you think that, oh, I work for the establishment now, so now I know better than you and what I should do with your child, and you're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the trans flag today, your kid, I'm going to make him do this or whatever. Like, it's crazy to me. And you probably saw a couple years ago, there was a teacher here near where we live who got caught again on camera talking about how he's got, a couple hours a day to turn kids into radicals. And
Was that the dude in the tank top?
it was the dude in the tank.
It was, yeah.
It's like, dude, that's not your role.
And
That's not your role.
The same, like the kind of caveat off that is, I saw it today actually, which is kind of crazy. There is a teacher. I believe they're in Oregon.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure. I would like to go back on that, but this teacher is
crazy, right?
Yeah,
Oregon.
She's
No,
she is teaching the kids in her class, right? So she is telling them that the American flag offends her. And so every day in that classroom, she has the kid. I didn't even know this was a thing, but she has the kids like essentially have like this allegiance to the trans flag every day in class. She's like brainwashing these kids. And, she got busted for it, of course, right? Just recently. It's just, and it's crazy to me, like how, like what you're saying is like that guy says he has an allotted time that he chooses to do to try to sway and,
to
whatever
turn
the
these
case.
kids into revolutionaries.
Exactly. And so like, in my sense, like I grew up in my classrooms every single day, pledge allegiance to the flag. Where did that go? Now it's like this flag offends people. Everyone gets their feelings hurt.
Welcome to move.
And if you're offended because I turn the can this way, now they're going to do whatever they can to make sure that you feel okay. And they're going to turn everybody against you because you're the one that offended said person. But then now you got these kids, they're going to school, and they're teaching them down this pathway of like, hey, this is what's right now. Whatever you knew before, that's gone. Put it in the trash.
It's exactly what he said. It's removing everything that is great about this country and the things we've gone through as a country out of the curriculum and eradicating it from our culture to mold it into a new culture that is about collectivism. It's about the government can take care of you. That's why they want you to have an electric stove. That's why they were pushing electric cars, all this stuff, man. If you can't
heaters.
Travel, right, your car runs on a battery.
Population control.
Right. Well, there is no.
If you live in a 15-minute city, well, guess what? You can't
you're
move.
okay.
And if we go to a CBDC, if we go to a central bank digital currency, now I can tell you what to spend your money on. If I go to a Fed coin, a stable coin that's linked, and that's what the Fed is doing next, is they're gonna come up with a Fed coin and a Fed payment system.
Control your money.
Then I can put a code on what you can spend your money on, and that's how they're going to do it. And that's the scariest part of gun control right there. Is like people don't understand. Like, people think that you're like, well, how are they going to take the guns? Like, there's too many guns. There's no way they can take them. Well, you know what the easiest way is if you ever turn up as a gun owner on a registry, they just turn your bank account off and they send you a text message that says, hey, just turn the gun in. But until you do, like, we can't turn your money on. What else?
Did you guys happen to see that list? It happened less than a year ago in California.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Concealed carry owners.
Yeah, they gave the list out.
Yeah, they made it.
My neighbor is, retired cop. And I texted him. I was like, hey, did you hear what happened on the news? And he's like, dude, he couldn't believe it. And it's like, oh, it was an accident. Like,
no,
do you really think that was an accident?
Nope.
I mean, you put everyone's name, address, phone numbers, and leaked this information.
Yep.
And it doesn't take. I'm sure you can find it out there somewhere, right? Oops, it's out there, but we took it down real quick so you guys don't have it. Nothing ever really goes away on the internet.
A fun question to explore here. Can you tell me the last time that any government in the history of the world has made a list and that was benevolent? Like, that was a good thing. Is there ever a list that any government has ever made for any reason that was a good thing that you're like, oh yeah, no, great. I would love to be on a government list. Yeah. Let me just sign up right here.
Yeah. No,
disarming a population is the number one thing. Like, there's so many quotes, like people love to bring up Hitler quotes. when it's like somewhat similar to what, President Trump said, or, some other Republican said, but they ignore what Hitler said about disarming populations in the East. He said that was the number one thing that he had to do before he took over Poland. He was like, the first thing I got to do is I got to disarm this population. Yeah. Mao said it. Everyone has had, like, every single population that has fallen under autocratic regimes or some fascistic regime, the first thing that they did was disarm the population. Yep. The very first thing. You know why people, when they were protesting in Canada, you know why they were getting stomped by horses like Clydesdales in the middle of the streets for a peaceful trucker protest? Because you're not allowed to own a gun like we are in Canada. No. If you try to do that shit in America on a large scale protest, those cops are going to be like, I don't necessarily want to do this because I'm going to get shot for it. Yeah, because then you remove the monopoly of violence.
There's literal examples of people standing up to authoritative, to cops, other agencies, because they are able to own guns. Yeah. I could think of 2 examples right now off the top of my head. The Bundy Ranch, Clyde Bundy.
Yep, there you go. Clyde Moody and the BLM. What was the was it the Appalachians? Mm-hmm. What was it? I'll find it. I'll Google it here in a second.
But
there was another one. No, Ruby Ridge. I mean, that was a classic ATF. Like, don't even get me started on the ATF and their completely illegal bullshit. But I'll find it. But I want to say it was like Appalachians or Kentucky or something. This whole town essentially was like the legislative branch or the police that were ruling over it. They basically went down to the cop and they like shot 4 people, and they were like, we're tired of this. Y'all aren't going to do this. And they basically overthrew an entire town. And it was a revolution that the government completely man, I'll find it. I'll find it. Talk amongst yourselves. Let me Google.
Okay.
Are you talking about the bluegrass and bourbon? Like out there?
That's it. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, surprised you could still find that.
I did it on my lithium battery operated phone in case anybody forgot.
Dude,
is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it says that Kentucky became the first U.S. state west of the Appalachian Mountains in 1972, and then it's talking about the indigenous history between bluegrass and bourbon.
I'm sorry. I'm talking about the Whiskey Rebellion. I'll find it. Continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm thinking of a specific one.
No, it's just.
Oh, is it? No. Are you talking? I thought you were talking about like in the past 100 years or something.
No, it is. Yeah, no, it's part of American history. It was in Appalachia. I'll find it. I'll have to get on my Brave and my whatever. Hit me with something else.
Yeah. So where this is like, we've talked about like the economy for a minute and like everything transpired previous 2020 going in and then where we're at now. But I kind of want to dig a little into the stature of us being involved now over with Ukraine in this proxy war.
Okay. Pause. It's called the Battle of Blair Mountain. You haven't heard of it.
Never heard
it was the largest labor uprising in United States history. It was the largest armed uprising since the American Civil War. It was an armed conflict. Basically a bunch of mine workers in like the 1920s. The trial of Hatfield for killing Albert Fells began. As an outcome from the trial, this entire town in August 7th, basically the miners committed like straight up rebellion against this town, and the United States government 100% tamped it down because like the government tried to rule over these folks. So the Battle of Blair Mountain was the largest armed uprising in the United States. And the reason why you've never heard of it is because the folks that rose up and that were armed, they won.
That's amazing.
So it says against mining owners or for poor wages in the treatment.
If there's a book, there's got to be.
Dude, that's insane.
You've never heard of it because they won. Because a bunch of armed American citizens were like, F you, no. And the government tried to call their bluff, and then they went at it, and they said, "Hold my beer,
dude."
They were like, literally hold my moonshine.
Yeah. All right, or that. That's even
right.
Continue.
That's supposed to be the point.
War, Ukraine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with of course, everyone's got their own opinions. I completely understand. But with what's going on and what has happened without, like you said earlier, getting into trouble, dropping said comparisons between names we probably shouldn't drop right now, but we all know. But yeah, so the whole lineup and setting up with the proxy war in Ukraine. And then I'm going to kind of jump around here and you guys just kind of pick off whatever you grab from what I'm saying. Okay. So, we all know about the BRI, right? Belt Road Initiative, which a lot of people have zero clue about. And it's actually, when you look at it on a world scale map, it is, we're essentially, like I said earlier, being backed into a corner. Okay. And so the way I look at it is, you've got this, this war that's been going on between Ukraine and Russia for over a year. And then now more than recently, you have China coming in, which I feel has just been so scheduled out. They knew this was going to happen. China sits back, like what I was talking to you about, Aaron, on Instagram. It's just kind of sitting back and, being like the boss, sitting back here waiting, letting people do the dirty work for them, essentially. So this right here, I'm just going to kind of touch base on, where is it? So with China coming in and stepping and trying to essentially hey guys, let's stop right now. Right. Well, I read last week and I saw when, I think it was last week, Putin took that trip over into Ukraine of those two cities that he took over. I don't know how to pronounce them. I'm going to butcher them, but we know.
Donetsk and Luhansk or whatever.
Yeah. Donetsk. How do you pronounce it?
Donetsk.
Donetsk. Okay, yeah. So he went there and was talking to all the people there, saying, "Hey, don't worry about it. We're going to rebuild everything for you, right?" Which is essentially what China's doing with BRI. And so, I guess what are your guys' thoughts on China stepping in and essentially trying to, I guess levy this war off of them between Russia and Ukraine. And what I'm looking at right now that I pulled online, this is all public source, is that I believe it's pronounced Xinjiang Production. They own 9% of farmland in Ukraine. So China imports from Ukraine as of 2020 machinery, nuclear reactors, boilers, electronic equipment, grain. That was a huge deal going on. Milling products, all sorts of stuff off their farmland because their farmland is so fertile out there. Now they have a piece of that, right? So what do you think China is, what do you think their next move is? What do you think they're going to do stepping in to Ukraine, who's not in NATO? But where do you guys think it's going to transpire after this?
I'll tell you what, for the people that are not tracking this, I've had a couple deployments to Africa. One of our jobs in Africa is to kind of talk to folks and figure out, hey, have you seen some stuff? I'll tell you right now in Kenya, there are major infrastructure improvements that are done by way of Chinese companies. You're like, who built this highway? You guys are not that, Kenya's GDP is less than Florida's. By the way, Russia's GDP is less than Florida's. Russia is a nuclear power that's essentially a gas station. It's like a gas station with nuclear with nukes.
It's a pretty funny analogy.
I will tell you that the OBAR, the One Belt, One Road initiative from China, and their 400-year plan and their 100-year plan, they are 100% actioning that on a world level. The base that I was at on my last deployment was less than 5 miles away, because I don't want to give away where the base was. It was less than 5 miles away from the Lopset port. The Lopset port had 3 super tanker skiffs, 3 super tanker areas, and they were going to include it to 25.
Dang.
So
what they do is China goes into these countries and they go, hey, we want to build this port. Don't worry. You don't need to pay for it. We are going to go ahead and provide the manpower to do it. We're going to provide the infrastructure to do it. We're going to provide the actual money to do it. But when it's done, we just ask that, you let us use it. And then they come and, places like Kenya or places like Uganda or places, all of these other places along the entire Ukraine, the OBOR, the One Belt, One Road map, and you can just go Google it. That's open source. One Belt, One Road Initiative, or BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. You can go and Google and you can look at all of these countries. And if you look at Chinese factories and Chinese companies that are paying people in order to provide infrastructure support, you can map this thing out worldwide.
Yeah.
I want to say, number one, tactically, China, good job. Number two, I want to say America, bad job at realizing what's going on. Like, we are orienting this game way too late. And it's because China plans in 100-year cycles. They don't give a shit about 4-year cycles or even 8-year cycles. They don't care. They're going to plan for 100 years. And they've been working this 100-year war. And you could see this, Putin and Xi just said, what was the last thing that Xi just said? It just broke on the news today or yesterday. When Xi was leaving with Putin, he looked at him. He was like, we're going to change something that hasn't happened in the last 100 years. He literally quoted his own paper talking about the 100-year war while he was in front of cameras. That is not by accident.
No.
So when you look at what China's done in Ukraine and what they're doing with their machinations, right? They already negotiated a peace in the Middle East. And now they're positioning themselves to provide a peace talk, which we should be doing. We talked about dime fill way earlier. They are taking a diplomatic role in order to negotiate a peace between Russia and China that we should be doing as a world power. And they're positioning themselves as that world power.
And these things aren't happening by accident.
They're not.
No.
You could go back 10 years. 10 years ago, people that we label conspiracy theorists were talking about what China was doing, and everybody sloughed this off because we were busy talking about pronouns and inclusion and DEI.
Bathrooms.
And that is a hard truth for people to hear, but that's why, is because it's a matter of priority. My entire position on this thing, when people talk about Russia and Ukraine and all this other stuff, I don't have any other position on Russia and Ukraine other than it's not the fight that matters. There is something worse than Russia and Ukraine, right? So when we talk about priorities, in my world, we do planning and contingency planning, and we plan for most likely, most deadly, and contingencies. What's most likely to happen, what's most deadly that can happen. So we need to protect ourselves against the thing that's going to kill the most of our team. And then what do we do when those two plans fail? I will tell you right now, most likely and most deadly is China. Period. End of statement. Put that on a fucking clip. Put it out on Instagram. The worst thing that can happen to us right now is China. Russia has been decimated in their military capacity. I will say, there are some other folks out there that'll be like, listen, the price that we paid, so we've paid 110 billion ish, about 70% of it has actually been 70% in funds and another 40 billion in military equipment. 30 billion of it is unaccounted for, whatever. Long story short, that price tag compared to what we would have to do to get into a shooting war with Russia is cheap. Okay. I understand that mindset. And I also vehemently and violently disagree with it. And also F you in your face, because what we should have been doing is what China did. What's China been doing this entire time? They haven't been giving aid. They haven't been giving aid to anybody. They haven't been giving military equipment to anybody. They've been sitting back, biding their time and watching what we're doing as we're spending time and resources and money and energy and ammo and personnel and attention and all these other things. And we have been hyper-focusing on Ukraine and hyper-focusing on supporting this proxy war because we think we're going to take down Russia. Remember when that dumb recruiting video came out with Russian shaved heads and they were all doing push-ups in the morning and everybody was like, oh, look at that. And it was the same time the army put out the cartoon one about the chick with two moms.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, oh, Russia's going to eat our lunch in a fight. Are they? Because they can't do simple warfighting functions. They can't do simple logistics functions. They don't have the NCOs to even support small basic movements. Dude, as a paper tiger, our intelligence community was completely fucking wrong. Our intelligence community painted Russia like this, we even changed our terminology. Russia is now the acute threat, but
Right.
China is the pacing challenge. Our entire system made a point to separate those two, is that China is the one that we need to keep pace with.
Yeah.
And then Russia is like, oh, well, they're the closest alligator to the boat. Oh, are they? They've lost half of their 5th gen fighters, 3/4 of their tanks, 100,000 people, depending on who you're looking at.
Yeah.
These are the people I need to worry about. They're screwed. They can't do anything. The only thing that they have is nukes. But China, on the other hand, has bought up farmland. They've put air vehicles over our homeland with zero appropriate response.
Yep.
They have postured themselves to go take Taiwan. They have acted aggressively in every single military capacity. They've 100% eaten our lunch in diplomatic engagements. We're supposed to be the people that bring everybody to the table. We're supposed to be the world leader in bringing people to the table, going, Russia, Ukraine, quit it. Anthony Blinken got on Fox News and said that a ceasefire in Russia, and I quote, would be unacceptable, end quote.
Yep.
Why would peace be unacceptable? Furthermore, why would a peace negotiated by the United States of America be unacceptable? That is a ridiculous statement. And you have to ask yourself why. You have to ask why. Why would a ceasefire where hundreds of thousands of people are dying, entire towns have been leveled? How could an American diplomat get on TV and say that a ceasefire is unacceptable? What motivation would they have for that? And all the while, China has not been doing any of this. You know what they've been doing? They've been studying game film.
Yep.
They've been developing hypersonic missiles that can hit us at home before we can mobilize. They've been developing AI learning technologies that can hamper us at home before we can do anything. They've been launching TikTok to show our kids dancing apps and things to waste their time and make them soft, while they've shown their children engineering videos and how to assemble an AK.
Saw that
That's
video.
what they've been doing.
That's
what they've been doing.
You can't even badmouth it. It's genius. Like literally
it's perfect warfare. It is non-kinetic, irregular warfare in a way that we've never seen us before, and they've beat us there. And the people that can't orient to this fact, and the kill chain did a great job, stealth war did a great job. We haven't changed our tactics since World War II.
No.
Shock and awe and that shit that worked in Iraq. Like, I lived my whole life in GWAT, dog.
Mm-hmm.
I lived my whole life doing World War II tactics that we were just better at.
Yeah.
Great. China's in a 5th gen fight, and they're eating our freaking lunch, and they're doing a better job at it.
Yep. And you keep talking about the kill chain. I've read that. I read Stealth War. But the way we move our military around, the way we operate, it takes too long. By the time we could even mobilize to do something, decided to take, Taiwan. Obviously, we have a lot of bases in Indo-Pacific. Those would be out of the fight immediately. They know that. They've been gaming this the whole time. It's basically just like we've created this playbook, and they've done everything they can to change the hearts and minds, right? There's that phrase of the American people, of the world. They know that if they broker a peace between Russia and the Ukraine, that just kind of pushes us right out of that seat. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This is, again, we keep going back to this, but it's not an accident. It's on purpose. It's by design. Mm-hmm. It has been by design. And there's, like you said, there's books out there that can explain this to you. And I'm not going to turn this podcast into a book review, but it's in black and white. It's yeah.
No, the thing that I look at is, it could just be my brain going 100 miles an hour, thinking different ways. But, earlier we talked about the Afghan pullout. Mm-hmm. Absolutely horrendous. I thought, my opinion, I don't care what anybody else says, was extremely idiotic. Mm-hmm. And, in that time frame, lost 13 servicemen, right? Mm-hmm. Service members. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, for what? Like, why would you do such a horrible, tactical decision in my opinion? And then now I have been thinking that the same thing is going to happen in Ukraine. China's talking about doing this whole like stepping in, trying to like cease fire between the two countries. And then I feel like it's going to further do the Belt and Road Initiative into Ukraine. And now we've just spent over $100 billion and across all aid, right? NATO, not, well, I guess NATO, but mainly us, over 100 billion, right? So it's
NATO
like
is America. NATO is
Yeah,
America with
exactly.
blue helmets. Like
Exactly,
the
yeah.
Chappelle skit where it's like, oh, NATO, what are you gonna? I'm gonna sanction you with your army, NATO. Oh, okay. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
NATO is America with some blue helmets. NATO has 2,500 service members that actually work for them as
Mhm.
peacekeepers or whatever. NATO is toothless without American might behind it. And the Afghanistan withdrawal, the simple we talked about like misunderstanding basic tactics and doctrine. Why in the world would we give up BAF before we gave up HKIA? How many times have we given, like, how many times would you give up a tax? Like, HKIA is in the middle of downtown fucking Kabul. And the fact, like, I was at another deployed location and I was very close to the people that were working the exfil from BAF. Like, I knew them personally. I was talking to them daily or, multiple times a week. And the first thing that when they were like, hey, yeah, we're bouncing out of Bagram Airfield before Kabul, I was like, you said it backwards. You mean you're going to bounce out of HKIA and then we're going to keep BAF until we turn the lights out? And they were like, nah, dog, we're going to leave. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make tactical sense. That doesn't make diplomatic sense. That makes no sense at all.
It just says to me that how unorganized the whole thing was. I mean, not that you need somebody to say that it was unorganized, because you watched it happen on the news, how unorganized it was, but there was no plan. It was just pull up stakes, get the fuck out of there. We don't care. Leave the shit. Let's go. Like, that's it. That's what happened.
Yeah. It's just, it's, and like how you were saying this, like tactically, like just thinking about it, like going back to, what I was talking about with like the Belt Road Initiative of like China stepping in now. And like, I feel where it's going is like, are we still going to like back Ukraine? Is Ukraine going to choose us? They're going to choose this China regime, or, the like,
kind of makes you wonder the conversations that have been happening without us involved in them with some of those leaders, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know, man. It's just, for some reason, my brain is going to, we're going to do another Afghan pullout, but in Ukraine. And now we have just sent them shit tons of stuff, right? And then so like China's going to step in now after this war's been going on for a year. We're already over $100 billion in stuff sent to them, and it's like, okay, cool. Is that going to happen as far as a ceasefire? And then B, is it going to be another Afghan pullout, but Ukraine style? Now China is going to step in and do this Belt Road Initiative. And then, now Russia is going to further go west, but now we set up that USAC base in Poland, and now we're trying to go further east. And it's just going to come into like this little like clash war is what I feel like.
Well, and then like when shit really gets real is, and we're going to have to see like what the stomach is for these other European countries is for when an Article 5 country of NATO actually gets attacked. And now you've added another wrinkle to this problem is like, okay, so we've put a base in Poland. We never had a base in Poland before. Like, we never thought that it was this much. Like, Russian incursion to the West was never a thing until now. Well, now what happens? We've already had Russian missiles, and, we think, depending on who you believe and what news source, the Russian missile landing in Ukraine, or maybe it was a Ukrainian missile landing in Ukraine, whatever. So what happens when a munition lands on an American base in Poland? Yeah. Because now that's a NATO country, and now that's an American base. That's sovereign American territory. Now there's American service members. We'll ratchet it up one for this hypothetical. What happens when one of those stray missiles that Russia says it wasn't ours, however, it went off course, and it hit an American barracks or a chow hall, and there's 30 American service members dead in an Article 5 country in NATO that's in Poland, and now Russia has nukes in Belarus.
Yep, it's a no-win situation.
Does that feel like deterrence to anybody? No. Does that feel like we're doing the right thing on a world stage? Because I got to be honest with you, it doesn't feel like that to me. That doesn't feel like we are winning in this chess game. it feels like we're reacting, and reaction is never good. Boxers say it all the time. Jiu-jitsu players say it all the time. You want to get there first. You want people reacting to what you're doing. That's why Trump was effective. It's why Reagan was effective. It's why Nixon was effective. There are some other presidents that were super effective at this. You know why? Because they had either one, unpredictability. Trump and Nixon, most notably, had the madman sort of capability. You didn't know what they were going to do. Right. Trump could sit down for chocolate cake. We talked about it earlier. Trump could sit down with chocolate cake for you. And he could also tell you that he just murked a world leader, or he lobbed 150 cruise missiles at somebody. And then Reagan was notable because all he did was, the term didn't even really exist when he was, but he was nationalistic by nature. Reagan's entire administration was marked by him increasing the strength of the Navy, increasing the strength of the military, and bringing everybody back home, except for a couple of excursions. And basically his job was, I'm going to pump money into my military and make it the most technologically advanced and the most military advanced Navy and Air Force and Marines and Army that it can possibly be. And if you F around with us, we're going to kill you for it. And people were like, well, tight. So we're just going to leave you alone then, because we don't have the money that you're throwing at this problem. That's why Reagan was so successful.
Yeah. So he'll carry a big stick thing.
Yeah.
Talking about
100%.
Talking about former presidents. So speaking of, right? So how do we catch up, right? It's because we do, let's be honest, we do have to play catch up, right? How do we get to the point where we turn the tide, right? What has to change? Especially with our relationship with China, trying to turn some of the relationships they've created with other countries in the Pacific, where our Air Force and Navy definitely need to beef up and do things differently. What do you think we need to do? Where do we get to that point where we're turning the tide that way?
Yeah. So Brandon, first of all, great question, man. Like, what do we need to do to actually start competing again? So number one, first and foremost, is we leverage American innovation. We have gone so far from, the military used to lead in everything that we did. And if you think about things that we have like DARPA, if you think about things like Skunk Works, if you think about these programs that are supposed to lead the way, and they're supposed to come up with these super secret things, like the military for a long time in America was leading the way for technology. That's completely flipped. And it's flipped because of the way that we do purchasing. It's flipped because of the way that we do contracts. It's flipped because of the way that we do innovation and, research in general. And if you just look at SpaceX, and if you look at Starlink, and if you look at Amazon as examples here, Starlink and Elon Musk, the American military, we didn't come up with the way for Ukrainian civilians to have internet. Elon Musk did. The first thing that Elon Musk was like, oh, okay. Free. He tweeted out, he was like, oh, hey, check it out. I'm going to deploy X amount of Starlink so that people over there can have,
send me
internet
an address
service.
to send these to.
Yeah. Holy shit, man. Like, why aren't we doing that? Why are we not leveraging low Earth orbit solutions to a lot of these problems that are happening? Why are we not leveraging American innovation again? The way that this was supposed to work is that, if you look all the way back to Operation Paperclip, we stole the smartest scientists in the world to come up with something that was brilliant for America, and we leveraged the private space in order to fund and support the government area, right? We have completely flipped on that. Now the government innovation area, if you even want to call it that, is its own animal. We have a contracting service. It's a self-licking ice cream cone.
It is.
Contractors make these bids in order to satisfy the contract, just to get the contract, not to support innovation, not to support new ideas, not to support any of these things that we actually need to get after. We just do things in order to satisfy the contracts. And by the time that they're fielded, they're 10 years old. We have F-35s that can't talk to F-22s, that can't talk to A-10s, that can't talk to ground folks right now. They can't even interact on their radios. They can't. The F-35 is the world's most advanced communication suite that has ever been known, and it can't talk to anybody other than F-35s. That does us no good.
One channel.
We need to, we need to find a way to leverage American innovation in a way that actually supports us catching up with China, with AI, with us actually making changes in our warfare, the way that we work a kill web, not a kill chain. If you have a chain, you only need to break one chain, one part of that chain, right?
Yep.
If you have a kill web, you take one or two webs away, and there's still other interconnected webs that
Yeah.
you can actually, the web is still intact and the structure is still intact. The number one thing that we need to do is we need to let capitalism loose. We need to let places like Starlink and Twitter and Meta and Northrop Grumman, we need to let them compete for actual contracts that aren't gimmies. For too long, we've had like Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, all these other places, and you see it in the way that the military gets out of it, dude. 4 stars are just setting up their contract at Northrop Grumman. They like these 1-star dorks and other two stars. The only thing that they're doing for the last 5 years of their career is setting up their career at Raytheon and getting their stock portfolios in order. That is not the way that it's supposed to be. These private companies, when you see Elon deploy Starlink at the very beginning of Russia, Ukraine, to be like, okay, well, cool. No, we're going to get these out there and you guys are going to have internet. I'm deploying Starlink right now so that you don't have connectivity going down. The fact that the military didn't do that, that is a bad sign. That is a sign that we have gotten way too far. And by the way, when you let companies compete, you're going to find it for cheaper.
Yep.
I guarantee that somebody can come up with a cheaper drone. Like if we want loitering munitions right now, like loitering munitions are the heat.
Yeah.
Like the Air Force has operational imperatives, right? And one of the operational imperatives is that they need to have unmanned attritable aircraft. And what that means is they need to have unmanned aircraft that they're okay with losing, that are armed with a certain amount of munitions in order to do specific functions. We've seen in Russia and Ukraine how the TTP is completely changing. It's not going to be close air support. It's not going to be troops on the ground. It's going to be, can I remotely pilot a swarm of aircraft that are armed with munitions in order to take out a specific target? I'll bet that with the computing power between IBM and Microsoft and, Elon Musk and everything he has at his disposal and all these other things, I bet if you let them compete and you told them lowest bid wins, I guarantee that contract is less than what we're paying the single source owner of who we're paying for it now. I'll guarantee it.
In last year, China floated an aircraft carrier that's sole purpose is to push drones, these drone swarms, right? And that's a disadvantage that we have against China too, is anything that the civilian tech sector develops has to go to the military, right? And I'm not saying that that's a disadvantage for us because you got people at Google or wherever that are too good to do business with the U.S. military. It's too difficult to do business with the U.S. military, and that's the U.S. military's fault.
They can't even get in. They can't even get a seat at the table. They might have the best idea ever, and they're like, well, sorry, we got a 4-year contract with Raytheon, and they're making and the Google guy's like, what are you talking about?
Yep. And then they go do a bid with China, and Mark Zuckerberg runs a cable under the water and connects it to San Francisco, all these things. But
or even worse, China just steals your IP. China does not give a shit. They just steal your intellectual property. The fact that China produced and field tested a drone that the Navy decommissioned in 2015 should tell you everything you need to know about how China is actually doing business. They actually stole the design and then flew a drone and had a whole IO campaign about it. And the Navy was like, well, yeah, we stopped developing that in 2015 because the X-17 or whatever it was called, it wasn't really going to do anything for us. And China was like, oh no, we totally made it capable and functional.
Yeah, made it work.
They were just 2 years behind.
Yep. It's wild. It's shooting ourselves in the foot. So, I mean, you're talking about the being able to have an attrition rate with some of these like unmanned vehicles. So I think that's kind of the whole point of the NGAD program, isn't it? The wingman, right? I don't know what they call it. Then they call it like mighty wingmen or something like that. Having these unmanned vehicles to support the next generation air defense fighter, right? Kind of getting on board with that. The Navy is too, but I mean, to me, it's at too slow of a rate.
Yeah. And again, because the bureaucracy of the machine has slowed us down. It used to be that, innovation moves at the speed of thought. Innovation moves at like, well, what if we do this? What if we do this? And that's why the civilian world, if you just look in the past 100 years, right? We went from pooping outside and not having working toiletry to having a phone that has the ability to get us to space. This cell phone in it right now has more computing power than what took us, if you believe, that took us to the moon the first time. That happened in less than 100 years. We went from Kitty Hawk in 1925 to fifth gen fighters with heads up display in less than 100 years. That's innovation, and it's completely driven by the civilian sector. And for whatever reason, in the last 15 years, we have just decided that we are going to stovepipe and restrain that innovation by way of military contracts and by way of making sure that people cannot actually compete. We do not have a competition system right now, and China does. China has it for a little bit of different, a different nuance, because their competition system is, we're going to have people come up with the greatest ideas and then we're going to steal them. Or, the new law that China just enacted about a year ago that essentially says anytime the government wants your data, we just figured this out during the ByteDance TikTok congressional hearings. China has a law that if you're a business that operates within China and the government requests your data, you have to give it to them.
Yep.
Period. Like, that's why, like, TikTok, they own TikTok. ByteDance works, and they're like, well, we don't cooperate with the CCP. No, you 100% do. You give them all of your data. You have to. But China's done that on the military sense, and they have no compunction about stealing our designs. They have no compunction about stealing our intellectual property. Like, they don't have any problem about that because they're trying to win.
Yeah, you can see that when you look at the J-20. You can see that when you look at the J-20. It's the same aircraft. It's just got, what are those called? Whatever. Yeah.
It's
100%.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see where it's going to go in the next 6 months. What's going on with everything right now with the, Russia, Ukraine, China, and the U.S. And then, like, before all this went down, people were like, oh, by 2030 they're going to have a one world currency, and then things are slowly trickling in my opinion, a whole lot quicker than that. They are trying to speed things up and essentially kind of like not have the patience, and they're trying to do everything so fast. And like I was saying earlier, it's like flavor of the month. What is it going to be for April? What is it going to be going forward?
Why is China trying to do that, though? What's driving that change? What's driving their urgency?
Yeah.
It's their population collapse.
Yeah.
This is the first year. This is the first year that they've had a population decline by 800,000. That one-child policy seeped into the culture after Mao's Great Reset. The first year that they've had a population collapse of 800,000 people, it is driving their urgency on the world stage, and they're making bold moves. Like China, again, they are perfectly happy to play the long game all up until this year. And now for the first time, they're making these big, bold moves on the world stage. Yeah. You know why? It's because they're like, we're not going to have military age fighting males for very much longer. Yeah. The one child policy and their population decline is really starting. And that, what I will say is that makes them very dangerous. If they don't establish themselves on the world stage, and by the way, America has a birth decline as well. If they don't establish themselves on this world stage and they don't really start making themselves a household name and, get us off the petrodollar and do these other things, they know, they can see the writing on the wall. They don't have a 100-year plan. They've got a 20-year plan.
About that one child policy.
Yeah, no, and there's, I recently heard somebody talk about it. So if anybody listening, if you know where this is coming from, I'm going to do my best to paraphrase. But essentially, it's another philosophy in that the Chinese see that the U.S. are trying to outpace them again, right? Because they're matching pace with us and catching up, right? That they become desperate in their actions because they think now's the time to strike before they really do. The United States really does get ahead again to a point where China has to do real work to catch up, right? And so coupling that with the population decline, the economic instability, and then seeing that the U.S. is taking steps to, maintain the upper hand, it just drives that desperate, right? Those desperate acts to do that. And I think that the 2049 plan, by being the world's hegemon by 2049, I think that they're going to try and realize that a lot sooner than they even thought they probably would have to.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. That's great input. That's a great optic.
Yeah,
it's man, it's like I feel like we could seriously sit here for like 5 hours,
probably.
and just like it's gonna be one of those things where, like, I'm gonna have to jot this down because I'm a note maker in the phone, and it's just we're gonna have to do like a part 2, a part 3, because we can just dive into everything. So it's, I mean, yeah, there's so much to talk about, and people that are listening, I really do hope that they start to understand, through podcasts or whatever, like, get off the news, do the research yourself. Everything, a lot of stuff is public source, like tremendous amounts of stuff is public source.
Here's the thing too that people need to realize is that the longer it takes for proverbially you to pull your head out of your ass, the longer, the more opportunity countries like China and Russia have to change our lifestyle, change the polarity of the world, having two world powers, right? And let me tell you this, man, your lifestyle is going to change if we don't pull our head out of our ass, so to speak. Everything you come to expect as an American, everything you've come to appreciate, that, like that line from A Few Good Men, you know what I'm talking about, where he says, you rise and fall under the blanket of the security that I provide you, right? Everything that you've enjoyed as an American up to this point is because of that. And they want to change that. And your life will change if we don't do something soon to stop it.
Yeah.
And all these things that you enjoy, the lifestyle that you've been able to have, all of it, it can change in an instant. It's not guaranteed. It's not something that is to be taken for granted, because it can go away. And there are people actively waking up every day to take that away from you. And that's a fact.
Yeah, it's going to come quicker than most people think. And people are so stuck in the now. They're not like trying to realize or trying to look ahead as, like what you were saying, like what could happen, what's going to get taken away from you. Like it is going to be an overnight switch so fast. And yeah,
it very well could be.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's wild to me. In some cases it is scary, like where it could go. But yeah, it's I don't know. What is kind of like your synopsis of everything?
Man, the rights that we don't fight for today are going to be the rights that your grandchildren didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
So the things that we don't stand up for right now, the things that, everybody likes to call it the slippery slope. And this is the whole reason why I started Aaron Loves America, right? Is that people are like, oh, it's a slippery slope, Aaron. You know what? Like, oh, well, I mean, it's just this, it's just this, it's just this, it's just this, it's just this. And you find yourself in this place that you don't even recognize anymore. It's Jordan Peterson and the boiling a frog by 1 degree and all of these other euphemisms that we've used. I will tell you right now that if, and I want to disagree with one thing that you said, Kris, is you're like, quit watching the news and whatever. No, watch every news source you can. And start noticing patterns. And when you start watching a bunch of different news sources saying a bunch of different things, like Fox News is equal to CNN. Yeah. Like, I'm sorry, it just is.
No,
they're both opinion news sources and they're both awesome. But when you start to be able to pick out the similarities and you start to be like, oh, CNN isn't saying this, but Fox is saying this. Fox is saying this and CNN isn't saying this. Neither one are saying this thing that's going on. You can start seeing the forest for the trees and you can go, oh, wait a second. Yeah. This is what's really going on. When you really reach that Jedi mind trick level of being able to read an entire situation, that's where you can really start figuring out when things are going on. And when you start talking, Brandon, great point about, having these rights taken away from us and not actually understanding what's happening and having it, slowly taken away from you bit by bit, man, you guys are both dead on. Like, this podcast is dead on for, no kidding, highlighting some things that are happening. And unless you start figuring out what's going on and then acting on those things, the rights that we have right now, your grandchildren are never going to know that they were even a thing. So it's easy to label things a conspiracy theory. It's easy to, look at the world and just go, no, everything's fine. And there's a bunch of like competing opinions, and who do I follow?
Somebody will solve
Stop
these
it.
problems for me, so I don't have to.
Stop it. No, stop it. That is not what we are here about.
Yeah.
That's not what America is about. That's why I started my page. And people will be like, listen, well, what do you think? You're going to be Tucker Carlson? What do you think? You're going to be Benny Johnson? You're going to be this person with 1 million followers? No, a rising tide raises all ships. There are not enough voices right now saying the truth and saying these things that are happening. And I'm not going to be right on everything. I'm going to make bad calls. I'm going to say things that I think are going to happen that don't come true. I'm going to have takes that are turn out to be false. That's not the point. The point is finding a voice of like-minded folks that you can establish a culture that can endure. I will tell you this. Republicans are not going to solve all your problems. I can tell you who caused most of your problems, and it's not Republicans. So you can do whatever you want. However, if you ground yourself in the values of America and Western culture, in that golden apple, in the silver frame of what we are, that all men are created equal, that we deserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that we're granted inalienable rights from a creator that are unable to be taken away, and that we love this country and will defend it from all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's a good baseline. Find those people, build your tribe, because that's what we're here to do. And from there, we can have better conversations, and we can find a way forward. And we've lost our way a bit. That doesn't mean we give up. No, we don't quit. This American experiment is worth fighting for, and we're able to make our way forward if we just find the righteous experiment that we're supposed to pursue. The founders were right. We were right in the Civil Rights March. We were right when we had the problems that we've had throughout the 70s and the 80s. We were right as we've evolved now. Even the last couple years, we're righteous. We're figuring it out, and it's worth fighting for. And as long as we continue to do that, we're going to be okay.
Honestly, that's probably one of the most eloquent things I've heard somebody say. I wish I could be as eloquent as that in speaking it. And I think that what you said about, you're not going to be right all the time. And that's not the point of this podcast, right? The point of this podcast was to just have conversations.
Yep.
I'm sure I've said something on here that probably wasn't 100% accurate. I'm sure I said something on here, that somebody's going to disagree with. And that's the whole point, man. And that's why we did this, because you said, like, these conversations need to be had. There's not enough people talking about them. And I'm not saying we're going to be the person you should come to every time to listen to get the answer for something. We're just going to talk about what we think is important. And we think, like you said, this American experiment is important. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened on the face of this earth. You're not going to tell me any different, and that's why we're here, just to have these conversations, because these things are worth being talked about.
Yeah, and the one thing that's kind of sticking out, like what you just said, is like find like-minded people, build your tribe. I mean, that couldn't be like any more powerful than what is going on right now. That people need to do that, and band together, and it's just I mean, I have thoroughly enjoyed like literally sitting back and just like listening to you guys go, and it's informational, eye-opening. I hope people understand what you guys are saying, trying to get across. We need to do a part 2, part 3, make it a series.
I would like to have you back if you're willing to, we can make
Anytime.
this a
Yeah, it's
I love y'all. I'll come back whatever you guys want me. Like schedule
Likewise.
it. I'm down. It's always a yes for
yeah,
me.
it's
You're awesome, man.
yeah, it's gonna be a good, it's not good. It's gonna be a great like continuation of series because
There's always gonna be something to talk about. That's for sure.
who knows what's gonna happen tomorrow, and then it's like boom, okay, cool. Now there's something that
Yep.
we can touch base on,
Oh.
and yeah, we greatly appreciate you coming on. And the communication back and forth between everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have
closing remarks. Seriously.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're ending on that part right there because that was yeah, how you said it was phenomenal. It was nice to hear. It was good to hear. Yeah, part 2, part 3 coming up, no doubt. And
Give Aaron a follow.
yeah,
Please follow us.
can you
Check us
plug
out.
your
Check him out.
Instagram?
Yeah. So it's Aaron_loves_America. It's easy. Just search Aaron Love. That's my actual name. I do love America. I'm out there on all podcast platforms. Come follow me. No big deal.
Oh, yeah.
And for everybody out there that has listened to this, I hope it's been insightful and informative for you guys. If you guys, through our platforms as well, like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, you guys drop the comments. We do pay attention.
Give us feedback.
Yeah. Let us know what you may want us to discuss on, part 2, or certain topics going forward. But we greatly appreciate you guys. And then here's looking forward to part 2 with Aaron of more of what's going on and what's to be. So we greatly appreciate you guys' time. And thank you again, Aaron, for coming on. And man, it's been an awesome experience. It was great meeting you for the first time personally. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Aaron loves America.
Thanks.
We love America. We love you. Appreciate it.
All right.